federal facility and with criminal charges for an a violation of the Occupational Safety and Health Act.
Well, that will definitely leave a very lasting impression, especially with this being the first circumstance of that actually occurring when you're being involved.
Well, not only that, but it was the first successful prosecution of a criminal violation in the history of the agency. As we went to the courthouse in New Orleans, and our company president stood up and pronounced the words guilty on 2 different occasions to a criminal violation of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which caused one of our employees their life. So, impression to say the least, and it kind of shaped my career from then on.
Well, and that brings up an excellent question. So what do you think now with the highest rank executive of a company can be held personally liable for the safety of his employees or her employees within the company? How do you feel about that change?
I think that it's just like any other aspect of the business. They're held accountable for the finances. They're held accountable for the quality. They're held accountable for their customer satisfaction. They're held accountable to the stockholders for performance on the street. So my view is, why not be held accountable for safety, which is another part of their business? Again, this is a classic case, just another example of the idea that we as safety professionals are responsible for safety. I've got a personal opinion of that, is that no, we're not responsible for safety. We are there to assist management. We're there to assist leadership in being able to do the best job that they can in running the business. And one key component of the business is safety. And learned a lesson a long time ago from my grandfather, and I call it the lesson of the milking stool. He had an old 3-leg, well-worn milking stool, and when we took it out to the barn to milk the cow, he taught me a great lesson. He said, "Son, look at the legs of this stool. What do you notice about them?" "Well, we got 3, Grandpa." He said, "That's right. What else do you notice?" "Well, they're all the same length." He said, "That's right, too." He said, "You can kind of survive by rocking back on 2 of them, but it's best if all 3 are left on the ground. And you get your best results with all 3 of them being equal length on the ground and solidly rooted." So I developed a philosophy that safety is just kind of like my grandpa's old milking stool. The 3 legs are number 1, compliance. I graduated before OSHA, been through OSHA, and OSHA has done a tremendous amount of good in our society and our country over the years. But it is a minimum standard, it is minimum regulations, but we will never, ever, ever get away from the compliance and the regulatory piece of it. So that safety and health professionals, let's just deal with it. Let's get that done and get behind us, because we find that those who have a excellent or leading safety record or performance do very, very well at the other 2 aspects in addition to compliance. And the first of those aspects is the business. And we as safety professionals need to understand and have this thing called business acumen. Yeah, we've got to understand the regulations, but we've got to understand how those regulations work in and through the business. And bottom line, if we're not there to make money, or we're not doing the things that we need to do to keep us in business, there are no jobs for us as safety professionals. And I think that this is our greatest challenge in being able to reach out and being able to understand what the business acumen and the language of business. And as I talk to young students in getting their degrees in safety, inevitably I'll get a question as to, is a master's degree worthwhile? And I'll tell them, yes, it is, but that master's degree needs to come from up on the hill. And I strongly recommend a master's in business administration, because you're now going to deal in an area of strategy rather than your safety area in functionality, which will give you powerful tools when you get out and have to deal with those people who are running the business.
I absolutely agree with you on that comment right there, because here's what ends up taking place, and this is just my point of view. We have safety professionals that finally make it into that big boardroom, or they make it into where they have the upper management, and they're not able to speak the language that they need to be able to speak to upper management. If I sit in there and I start telling you about a regulation, if I start telling you about a code, and I'm not able to address your return on investment, most of the times they don't care what you have to say. And I agree with you 100% on that.
No, that is correct. And that is one thing that we're just, as a society, as a profession, we're just coming around to realizing that we need to look at the business. And I had a CEO who was a mentor a long time back that says, hey, all of you guys, meaning safety professionals, you want a seat at the C table. You know, CEO, COO, CIO, CFO, and all of those other folks. And he says, I don't mind you having a seat, but you got to get your seat just like I got mine. You got to earn it.
We are changing safety cultures, one broadcast and one podcast at a time. safetyfm.com.
I spend a lot of time in the backyard, and in 2009 it was me, your fire pit, that accidentally started a wildfire when one of my embers landed on dry brush.
Spark a change, not a wildfire. Visit SmokeyBear.com, brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
This message is for all of you sitting in the passenger seat. And apologies if it gets a little uncomfortable, but how does it feel to be at the mercy of someone who thinks a random text is more important than your life? Someone who takes their eyes off the road while speeding along in a 3-ton hunk of steel. Freaky, right? Well, why not just ask them to stop? Or better yet, volunteer to text for them. It might be a little awkward, but believe me, you'll live.
Learn more at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
safetyfm.com with Jay Allen. Changing safety cultures, one broadcast and one podcast at a time.
Absolutely. And I know that I interrupted you earlier, and I want to make sure that we get that third leg in there, because I know that my audience will crucify me if I don't get that information out from you.
Well, I'm not going to let you forget that, because it's most probably, it depends on how many people think about it, it's most probably the toughest of the three, and that's people. And I don't care which business you're in, what industry you're in, what type profit, not for profit, but we can't do these types of things without people. Even in the most automated of our industries, it takes somebody to design it, set it up, maintain it, run it, program it, and that is the most interesting portion of our aspect. You know, the challenge of dealing with that infinite human variable. And let's face it, all of us are there, and we feel better some days than others. Our mind, when we're at work, does not strictly stay for 8, 12, 10 hours on the task at hand. And how can we, as a profession, take a look at understanding that we're not perfect?
We hear a lot of verbiage being used in the safety community of, are you a behavior-based safety guy? Are you a human organizational performance person? When I hear you talk, I can't figure out which one you kind of coincide with. So which one do you think that you fall into, or you really don't have a category?
I don't have a category, and that's been our problem. As we fall in and we're looking for the silver bullet, and we try to fall into those things, or we want the easy way out. And it is not easy. And I think that this behavioral or human performance, error reduction, whatever, is we've got to have a system that is fairly similar to this. Tough to do, easy to say, but tough to do. Knowing that we are creatures that make mistakes, we're not perfect, to allow us to make that mistake, but then get back between the lines and have a minimum of a consequence for that error. And I think it's when we put the best of both worlds together, from my friend Dr. Georgie Popoff in Prevention Through Design. Not only prevention from the guarding aspects of it, but prevention through the anticipation of what the human element might be and where we might be exposed, where we might be at risk, and then understanding that sometimes we're going to fail, but let us fail in a methodology that we can learn from it and we don't get hurt.
But you hear this new safety point of view, and I get very confused on what are we talking about here. I do believe that, yes, I think that you're right on target when you're telling me, yes, there is not one that is the fix-all. It's not the silver bullet. So I get confused on what is this new point of view on safety?
Well, this new point of view has been around quite a lot. Everything old is new again, the old saying goes. And when you take a look at human performance and error reduction, the Department of Energy, the INL, the nuclear business has been doing this and understanding it from a risk perspective, from a design perspective, and consideration of the human element into this. The aerospace industry has been doing this for a long time with that person sitting in the cockpit of, from my former employer, a helicopter, or sitting there with a 787 Dreamliner with 300 and something passengers in the back, and they've learned the systems and the interaction and the interdependency of the human on these systems, and they've learned, by and large, how to make it work. So I think what's happened over a period of time, and if you notice one of the keys in the sessions, there were a number of sessions that are now talking about HOP, human organizational performance. Well, my personal view is they put the organizational word in there from the old human and error to get the business community to sit up and pay notice. But again, it is the same thing that we're talking about because we use the same concepts in business. For example, if you've got a quality control issue and there are defects coming out of a machine, what do? We go back, we take a look at it, we solve the problem, we take a look at the process, all up and down the value chain, the supply chain, and then we fix the process to where, to a degree, we can count on relative quality and consistent production. Matter of fact, the whole industry of Six Sigma was built and is built around these types of concepts. So I think they're talking, and it's an idea with this behavior or error or design, which came first, the chicken or the egg. And I don't think we'll ever get to that. I do firmly believe, though, that by looking at the potentials, by looking at good design principles, looking at us humans as infallible creatures, and then asking a simple question in my wildest imagination, what could happen? And then deciding whether we're going to address that risk and or not address the risk, I think we'll get a lot further down the road. And we as safety professionals, I speak with, and I use this for myself, I'm lazy. I want to take the easy way out. Give me the magic pill, give me the silver bullet to be able to do this. And over time, we're learning that there are none and that we've got to do it. And just like that CEO said, I got no problem giving you a seat at the table, but you got to earn it. And he earned his or she earned hers through good, hard work. And I think that that's what we do. Our issue, though, is the results or our failures can often have catastrophic consequences and become front page news.
And that's the truth, that we are a failure to fail. And I always get worried about the whole portion of are the consultants using this terminology that they're kind of reusing? And you kind of did address that. You being the president of Kendrick Global Enterprises, which you can find out more information at safetybyskipper.com. Do you have a lot of people contact you and say, hey, I want to fix my culture. I want to fix my safety programs, and essentially they're looking for the magic bullet?
A lot of people are looking for that quick fix, that magic bullet. I've had a call a couple of years ago with someone wanted to change culture in 6 months. We finally agreed that I was not the best person to do that because it's not going to be a sprint. This is a marathon that we're in. And when we're talking about culture, you just hit on one of my favorite topics because, as you noted during the PDC and in Seminar Fest and in numerous, we're all looking for this thing called a safety culture. And I get into